Starting off this module, we're going to be spending a lot of time within SQL Server Management Studio. This series of videos will be relatively short snippets talking through concepts, and really it's about design and best practices. So just kind of keep up with that as we go through, so things may feel a little disjointed. First thing I do want to kind of just touch on is follow up to the homework assignment and how we go about setting up branches within our database. So for me, I'm going to go into my DB2 library project or database and go under tables, right click new table, and I'm just going to set up kind of a standard database design for our branches. So we'll have an ID column, which will be an integer. That'll be our primary key field. Need to also set that as our identity. Set that to yes. So then each branch will have a name. So we'll have name. We'll make that a varchar 400. Each branch will have an address of sorts. So another varchar 400 will be probably more than sufficient. City varchar 100, and then state, and we'll do that as a varchar 50. Zip code as well, which we'll do a varchar of 10. There'll be a phone number, and we'll do a varchar of 20 just to cover anything that may be more international based. And then maybe we'll have a primary contact name. We'll do that as a varchar of 100. Primary contact title, another varchar 100. And primary contact email, we'll make that a varchar of 200 just to cover our bases again. So you'll look through here and you'll see a lot of this stuff, and basically when it comes to database design, I'm going to be very transparent. It's a lot about thinking through what kind of data do you need to capture, what kind of data or information is relevant, and it's not a perfect science in some senses. It's very much around, what do you feel is the accurate pieces of data or accurate amount of data that needs to be captured and processed. So as we go through this database designs, you may look at this and go, well, why did he pick those fields or those columns? Obviously, there's certain rationale to things like needing primary keys, and then we'll be talking more in this module about foreign keys. But when it comes to the content that you're capturing, you may find that that becomes an evolutionary process, that becomes a learning process, whereas you get more familiar with the domain that you're building the application for or designing the database for, that you need to add additional fields. You need to maybe even go through a refactor process on your database design, depending on how far into the design, development, and deployment process you are. And that's all just kind of part of the life cycle of designing anything within the IT space, is that you go through these iterative processes as you begin to learn more about the application you're building, the users you're building for, things like that. You'll go through and you'll start making changes and start to understand the space for the application that you're building. Alright, so we'll go ahead and save this, and we'll call this branches. Now the second half of the assignment was to create a many-to-many table between branches and books. So we'll go ahead and right click and say new table again, and this time we'll call this the branch ID. That'll be an integer, and that'll be a foreign key reference, and then we'll have a book ID. That'll be another integer and foreign key reference. And we maybe want to capture things like purchase date, so the date that was purchased, and really we could expand this in a number of different ways. With the way that I'm conceptualizing the build of this table and this database is that each one of the books that we would have in our inventory would be its own unique record or row within the books table. And that way, if we have 3 copies of any given text or any given book, each one would have its own unique row, so then we would have that same book or each one of those 3 books associated to the same branch. So that just kind of ties hand in hand, so there's no need to track in my design how many books are at that branch, how many copies are available, things like that. But that's perfectly acceptable. It just becomes more of a management factor as you're starting to build out that database relationship and bits and data start to move around. It's either you can kind of compute it on the fly based on the database design, or you have to make sure that you're keeping your fields and records updated so that you've got quick access to that data. So I'll just kind of start with that. We'll go ahead and make both of these together our primary key. And again, that'll be the relationship between the book and the branch. So we'll go ahead and save that, and I'll call this my branch book table. So that should give us both the tables needed for completing the assignment from the prior week, and that at least gives us a good structure to say that we've got books, branches, authors, and loaners, and we've got relationships all being built inside of those.